Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. So, what is this? Well, this is a show where I sit here for about an hour and you ask all of your hobby-related questions, and I do my best to answer it, or at least hopefully point you in the right direction, or share whatever I can to help you along. So, as always, there's space over here on one of these sides where you can type questions. So feel free to go ahead and start dropping those in. I'll take everything I can, try to give as complete an answer as I can, and try to help you out with whatever you got. While I'm waiting for some questions to roll in, there's a couple, but I thought I'd share something fun with you guys that I finished up just a few minutes before the show here. As I'm sure everybody knows, I'm working on my Slaanesh. And so I had the Fane. I didn't like the face. A lot of people don't like the face. The face is like this thing that normally sits in there. So I cut that out. And but I didn't just want to use the portal, which is this thing. So I thought I'd give everybody a look at this who's watching this before I share this tomorrow. So instead, I sort of replaced it with some plastic art, and I wanted to do something cool. So I had it. So I recreated the prison of Slaanesh in the umbral there on both sides of the thing, or tried my best to do that. One of my favorite pieces of art they've done so far for Slaanesh, for any art, period. So that was a fun thing. So there you go. I'll share some real photos of that tomorrow. I was being ginger because the glue holding the two pieces together is still drying. Sorry, I'm just making sure that's nice and attached. Okay. Anyway, so that's a fun thing. Hopefully you guys like that. At any rate, it looks like we got some questions rolling in. Like I said, drop your questions in and let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Here we go. So the first question that was posted, Michael, I like it. He got in before the show even started and said, what are my thoughts on the new contrast paints? Basically, do I think they'll have, some good potential for higher quality paint jobs? I don't know. I mean, I've used them for 5 minutes. I spent a lot more time talking to, their chemist who created them, one of them, and kind of really breaking down what they're for. And he said that a lot of the heavy metal people use them for a quick, shaded base coat, and then they do all their work on top of it from there. So I could see it in that regard. That is to say, if you're doing a very high level paint job, I could see them being like a brush on glaze, much like we do over Zenithal. A lot of my experimentation will be how they look over things like Zenithal. Any paint can be part of a pro paint job, realistically, unless it's some, crappy craft paint with giant pigment or bad metal paint with giant pigment. It's just a question of whether or not you put the time in. So I want to do the work before I guess. I think they're a great tool. I'm excited to see them. Anything that gets more models painted, period, is good. Because a lot of people don't enjoy painting as much as I do, where it's an addiction. If it's helping them get over that hurdle and lose some of the fear and get painted models on the table, then I say thumbs up. Okay. All right. Aviad also says he likes the new interview series. Thank you. So I did my first episode this last week of the interview series. I had Sam Lenz on. We're going to do that about every other week. Hopefully bi-weekly will be what it is. I mean, obviously I'm at the sort of mercy of a lot of these artist schedules. Many of them are very busy between commissions and teaching and traveling for conventions. But I'm going to do my best to try to keep it on a bi-weekly schedule and do a lot of interviews. I'm really excited about the series. I love just sitting down and talking to artists. I hope you all will enjoy it. Okay. Omri, about 2 years ago, I asked you, what do you have against dwarves? Everything. I still have that. Does your opinion change now with the Fire Slayers and KO? No, zero change in that opinion. I don't like dwarves. I've never liked dwarves. I don't, as a fantasy trope, I have no interest in them. The aesthetic does nothing for me. I don't like their little blocky square shapes. Nope. And nothing like the boats are kind of cool. I enjoy the boats in KO. But boats aren't dwarves. Hashtag boats aren't dwarves. So no, it's just a personal aesthetic choice. It just doesn't work for me. I think I keep a running Excel spreadsheet of every D&D character I've ever played throughout every edition. It's long. I've played hundreds of characters over time, and I think I've played one dwarf. So, you know, that should tell you how I feel about them. Even in like even when we're not talking about the models, I can't stand them. So there you go. Bree says, how do you do the silver scratches like GW did on the Gitz Arachna Cauldron? Silver scratches on the Gitz Arachna Cauldron. I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, I can tell you how I would do silver scratches, but let's take a look. I'll Google the image real quick. Gloomspite Gitz Arachna Cauldron. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, okay. I see what they did. Yeah, they just, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. What they're doing there. Sorry, I'm leaning into the camera because I'm just trying to really see these close up. Yeah, I mean, they're just taking some kind of metal paint, you know, and just like literally just making little hashes and scratches on it. That's all there is to it. I would say it's easier if you have something like Vallejo metal color as opposed to the crappy metal paint that they were certainly using for that. Because look, I make no bones about the fact I think GW metallics are trash. Most or less all metallics are trash except for Vallejo metal color. Within acrylic, there's lots of good sort of other types of, you know, if you're looking for other types of paints and stuff like that, like this is amazing, but it's not an acrylic and it's highly toxic and stuff. But yeah, it's just literally getting a nice sharp brush, you know, and getting some flowing metal paint and just doing very tiny hashes and scratches and dots. That's it. Lots of little hashes and scratches. Like literally just think you're taking a very like a size 0 brush or something. You get a nice tip. You're getting that paint flowing. If you're not using something like Vallejo metal color where it's very thick, you're going to have to use some kind of flow improver to get it going, and then it's not going to be very strong. So you're going to need to make that hash a couple times. I recommend you grip the brush up tight, and you're doing this, right? There's just a general tip. I see a lot of people grip their brush lazily like this. They'll hold it kind of back here like you would a pen or a pencil. That's how you get bad control. Choke up. The more you choke up on the brush, the better control you have. So stuff like that. Okay, let's see. Mega Hamster, how would you paint white fur? I have some Wampas from Star Wars to paint. Well, Mega Hamster, you have an awesome name. The first thing I'll say is wait about another week, and you may see a video that'll help you out with that quite a bit. There may be something coming where I talk about fur next weekend. But, you know, if we're talking about Wampas and things like that where they want to be cold, if you want the very simplest of methods, then you would make them like gray in general. Here you go. I'll walk you through exactly how I would do it. I would airbrush on a base coat of basically gray at the highest with some deeper blue-black-ish shadows where appropriate. So in the curve of their back, under their arms, you know, normal, they're still humanoid, so they have shadows somewhere. Then I would probably wash the whole thing in a very simple, light, very thin blue glaze, like more or less like Guilliman blue. That blue glaze is what I mean. And then I would just dry brush the whole thing gray white, not white, gray white. And then I would dry brush the tops area where light would collect white. That's your simplest method. What you'll see next week is a very different method that could give you a really cool looking Wampa, but it'd be more time consuming. That's how I would do it. Because you want a blue shade under there, slight blue shade. Not when I say that, I often worry people are going to think what I mean is this is what you want under there. This is not what I mean. Okay. When I say a blue shade, I mean like a hint of blue. You know, like to make it cold because you want the Wampas to seem cold. When do you choose to use a dry palette? When I'm using metal paints or dry brushing or using pigment, which are the three things I have on that dry palette right now that I just used it for, not, 30 minutes ago. Metal paints, never put metal paints in your wet palette ever. Don't do it. Don't put them on there. Shouldn't. It's bad. Don't put metal paints on a wet palette. Just let them dry out on your dry palette. It's fine. Who cares? It's better to waste paints than to deal with bad metals. Metal paints on a wet palette will get too much water in them. They will break down. They're already very sensitive to getting water in them because the nature of how the pigment and the medium is together. And you will also pollute your wet palette very easily. You'll get metal flakes into the sponge, which will then come up later and pollute later work. It's not a thing to do. So metal paint always goes on a dry palette. Pigment work obviously always goes on a dry palette because it needs to stay dry, and dry brushing because you generally don't want the paint to be all runny and stuff. What do you think the formula is for contrast paints? I'm assuming we will be able to make it ourselves. I would not assume that. It is not any simple formula. As I said, I spent a lot of time talking to the chemist, and like they were doing a lot of science. There's a lot of science behind paint. And you know, they really there are literal trade secrets that they can't share in how they made that paint. And I'm sure that other paint chemists could probably reverse engineer it to some degree, but I know that what they've done right now is pretty unique, and I don't think you could reverse engineer it very easily. Now, what's in there? There's probably something to lower the viscosity to some degree. I'm sure they're using a couple different chemicals, probably some amount of retardant to keep it from drying as quickly so it can move, probably some type of flow improver additive so it does gather properly. They upped the pigment way up, and that would be the part that would make it impossible to recreate. Because when you've got paint, you've just got a set amount of pigment, right? And they upped the pigment count in this paint way, way high. And that's not a thing that's easy to do. Like if you have a set paint, you can't really legitimately add pigment to it. You can. I mean, you can take powdered pigment and add it in, or you can use ink. Those are two ways to increase the intensity, but you can't add pigment in the way we would normally think about it. If you add ink, you're also going to change the properties because you're not just adding pigment, you're adding a bunch of medium and other elements as well. So no, I'm sure it's something like that, but who knows? They said that there's a lot behind it, and I believe them. It clearly has very different properties just from my 5 minutes of use than what you would normally see in a lot of paints. Charles, what's the difference between Vallejo thinner medium and glaze medium? Not much. But here's the short answer. What he's asking about is specifically these two. Okay. I'm not sure because Vallejo doesn't give the exact formulas, but here's my impression of it from use. This is more or less just medium, with maybe some kind of water ratio, like water and medium ratio. So it's solvent and bonding agent. This also has some kind of something with the drying, like it's screwing with drying time. So that tells me there's some amount of retardant in there, as well as some kind of flow improver. My perception of it is this plus a couple more additives, minorly, to change the properties of it. How do you use them? I mean, those minor differences, about the same is the answer. It's really not going to matter much. You use them to just get your paints thinner without breaking down the pigment like water and make glazes. You can use either to make glazes. Neither is going to function that differently unless you're like really into the minutia of ultra high end work. For the most part, they will work more or less interchangeably. Okay. And the reason you want to use mediums like that in general, as opposed to just water, is because then you tend to prevent things like coffee staining and stuff like that. Your glazes get smoother. You get less of a powdery, chalky effect because the pigment is still able to evenly be dispersed because you retain the appropriate amount of bonding agent. You just spread the pigment out and disperse it more evenly. All right. Let's see. Jarrett says he tried an oil wash on Mollog and it came out really grainy, like he was washed with dirt. Was the pigment not mixed well enough, or is it just cheap paint? Could be a couple different things. So there are three options when you get that effect with an oil wash. And it's one of the challenges with oil washes is you have to, they're tricky to mix exactly right. Here's your three things. One of these three things happened. All right. I'm not going to actually count down my fingers because I just realized what I would do since I was doing that three. So option one, you thinned it too much. You used too many spirits and you broke down the actual paint. So your spirits are your solvent in the same way. The oil technically like the linseed oils or whatever else is it's different oils, but or your bonding agent. You broke it down too far. It's just like coffee staining with an acrylic wash. If you spread it out too thin, same thing happened. That's why you got that dirty effect. You effectively broke up the ability of the bonding agent to hold the pigment in the oil. Option 1. Option 2, it's bad paint. Sure. I mean, I don't know what paint you're using, but yeah, there are bad oil paints around. And so it could be that, or it could have gone, those things don't really go bad, but I guess if it got polluted somehow. Option 3, okay, as far as like what would have happened there is you didn't mix it well enough. You really need to mix an oil wash twice as long as you think you do. Go until you think you're done, and then go again that much of time. Okay. But my recommendation would be, it's probably, if I had to guess, it would be the first one. Usually that happens when it's too thin and you've added too much solvent and destroyed the bonding agent's ability to evenly disperse the pigment out over the surface. All right. Josephora, what type of medium do you use and what for? I think I just answered that, but like, what type of medium do I use? If I'm just medium, Green Stuff's World Master medium is pretty good. Watercolors, just like acrylic thinner, which is just medium, is pretty good. I use them in the same way I just described, right? To thin out paint sometimes. I like to have it when I'm working in a lot of glazes. I'll keep a little medium just on my wet palette over to the side so I can dip my brush in there, and it just helps keep everything smooth. Especially when you're trying to thin lighter colors is where it's really essential. Trifos, do you have any tips on practicing blending on cloth like capes or cloaks? I've watched your blending videos, but I can't get it. Well, yes. 1, use thicker paint than whatever you're using. 2, use a bigger brush than whatever you're using. Those are probably the 2 biggest deals. Like, I use these size 8 brushes. If you saw me do that in the video, I was using a brush like this. That's not an accident. That's intentional. This amount of space, when you try to use a brush like this and do a blend like that, it's going to fail. You don't have enough surface area. And what you're doing is just cutting the paint. Okay, you're literally just hashing it up, and it's not going to work. You need a big old surface area, and you need to rotate the brush. Like, if this is the brush, it needs to be rotated to the side like this. When you're wet blending like that, it needs to be on the side of the brush, and it needs to be like a thick glob of paint you put on here, and then you wipe, and then you spread it down like this. And then you get your second color, and you put a big glob, and then you push it together. Then you wipe. I'm wiping off like on a paper towel, you wipe off the brush, and then you thin and spread together. You're painting on the model. It's once you get the hang of it. Paint can also matter if you're using very thin paints. Like if you're trying to use air paint or something, it'll tend to suck. Thicker paints are better. Use like Vallejo model color or grab some Scale 75. Scale 75 does it amazingly well. Or my new favorite for doing it, which is the Pro Acryl stuff. The Pro Acryl stuff is aces. It's the best. So there you go. Hopefully that helps, Trifos. Oh my gosh, lots of questions. Okay, what scale of basing, such as dirt, etc., do you use for 54 millimeter miniatures? Same thing I use for everything else. I don't change it at all on 54 mil scale. I mean, I'll change if there's like elements in the world. I might change those. That is to say, like I'll use different size bricks or that kind of stuff. But when we're just talking like dirt and rocks and grit and detritus of nature, I don't change it at all because it doesn't matter. A tree can be lots of different sizes. A bush can be lots of different sizes. Rocks and grits can be lots of different sizes. You don't need to worry about it that much. It's not relevant. The difference in scale between those two isn't enough that it matters. Nature looks like nature. As long as you're creating a varied size and scope of effect, like, the difference between some 32 millimeter barbarian standing in the wilderness and a 54 millimeter barbarian standing in the wilderness, it's all wilderness. It's not going to matter. Like, how big is a rock? It'll be smaller comparatively, right? But that's it. It's a rock. I don't alter it. What do you do when you want to airbrush Scale 75? Mine clogs a lot. Thin it more. I use Vallejo thinner exclusively. I do about a 5 or 6 to 1 ratio with a drop of water as well. The pigment in Scale 75 is ultra dense. You are not going to break it up. So like 6 thinner, 1 water, or 2 drops of water and 1 thing of paint. And then mix, mix, mix. And that's the ratio you want to look at with Vallejo thinner, at least. Tom Van Eyck, Vallejo metal color, true best stuff ever. Tried his first few weeks ago and they are an absolute game changer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once you use Vallejo metal color, if you've only used like crappy acrylic paints, acrylic metal paints, and then you use Vallejo metal color, it's like, it can make some inappropriate revelations to other first experiences, but it is a game changer. It's just a different experience. It is a different metal paint. Okay. Joseph Unger, I'm looking at getting into 40K. Wanted to start with Skitarii. Would you recommend painting the figures before assembly or post assembly? Painting the figures. Oh, would you use sub-assemblies with Skitarii? Depends on the Skitarii. Some of them definitely yes. I would have sub-assemblies that I would paint and then assemble. So like all the characters where they've got like all these different, freaking tubes and pokey bits and bejangles coming off the sides. A lot of those need sub-assemblies. But things like the Rangers and stuff like that, you can generally do all together. And that's fine. So it just depends kind of on the models. There's a fair amount in Skitarii you can have fully assembled without an issue. They actually are nice. There's not as many. Marines I find generally more annoying. The ones that have their weapons close to their chest are the thing that drives me crazy. Skitarii are generally like, they're a lot more open. A lot of their guns are down. The biggest thing is the characters. You got to do sub-assemblies on those guys because they're just a nightmare of pokey bits and impossible things you'll catch your brush on. It's a cool army, though. It's a lot of fun to paint. It's a challenge. Charles, why does my airbrush keep getting blocked? I clean it out, needle cup inside the tip, use proper thinner and flow improver, game air paint, but it blocks right away. Well, I don't know. I don't have any problem, and I do the same things, but I can give you a theoretical answer. Where are you mixing the paint? If you're putting the paint in first, and then you're putting the thinner in, and then you mix it in the cup, even if you backfill, you will dry tip and clog it every time. Because the nature of the channel that you're filling with paint, you're getting a tiny amount of paint stuck in there, and even when you backfill, that dry paint will sit down there and never get mixed with thinner. Always put thinner in first or liquid in first so it fills the whole channel. Then you put your paint in and mix and backfill from there. Beyond that, yeah, I don't know. Like, it could also be how you're cleaning it. So I'll talk for a moment about how I clean my airbrush. I really, really rarely have clogging problems. Let's talk about your airbrush. So here's your airbrush. It's got paint in it. My airbrush is a freaking mess right now on the outside, but it's clean enough on the inside. You're done painting. So you do what I just said, you spray some paint, and now you need to get this out of here. What most people do is they then blow the rest of the paint out. First wrong step right there. Because all you're doing is saying, hey, let me put a bunch of paint in this very small area that I didn't need it and encourage tip dry. So instead, here's what you're going to do. You're going to grab yourself some kind of water bottle. I use my CK Studios branded water bottle because, I'm on brand message. You still have paint in here. You're done painting. You fill the water up in here. I just blow water into whatever paint is left. Okay. So like I just bunch of water in there. Then I backfill it. Backfilling it. That has blown a bunch of chunks and dry pieces back up into the cup. You never then put that back out through the front. You then get a cup of water or something and you dump it until there's only a tiny amount left inside. Then you put a little more water in. Then you backfill it. And then finally, when there's just basically a little liquid inside, you just blow out the rest. Clean as a whistle. You won't have any challenges. I blow through paints fast. I don't get clogs because that's how I clean it. People who, if you've taken a class with me, you know that how fast I switch to these things, and I'll go all day with just, not doing anything special. I never disassemble. I'll use 50 different paints. And if you follow that method, if you follow everything I just said, you shouldn't see any tip dry. Hope that all helps. Brian, Vince, thank you for the Heresy Death Guard video. Awesome, man. I'm glad it was helpful. Do you think oil washes, weathering paints would be worth exploring in these Death Guard schemes? Yeah, man, 100%. I think they would. You can do some sweet, like streaking and grimy effects and stuff with them. Yeah, it's like I was using simpler sort of quick methods to do my weathering. That is to say, like just using some retardant medium and standard washes and stuff. But yeah, you could absolutely do with oils. I think that'd be a lot of fun. If you're just getting into oils, I would highly recommend you check out like James Waffle. He has a bunch of tutorials on his channel, and he has a great Patreon and stuff like that where he deals with oil paints a lot. So if you're really interested in it, it's a worthwhile. I mean, the man is an artist in the truest sense of the word. He was a canvas artist for 15 or 20 years before he got into miniatures, and he's got an unbelievable vision and skill with this stuff. So very much worth a check out if you're interested in oils or just well painted miniatures. Zektari. If you didn't have an airbrush, would you rather use GW varnish spray or AK interactive with brush? AK interactive, period. End of story. AK interactive with a brush is 1,000 times better. You know, but I mean, like, just because you're not going to have as much problems. Now, that being said, if I don't have an airbrush and I need to varnish stuff, I would just use, and rattle cans are available, I would just use tester dull coat. That's probably your second best option. Like brushing on varnish is a pretty big nightmare. I do brush on AK Interactive sometimes, but I do it for specific purposes. Like there's a small area that you know, because I did some thin glazes with an ink, got super glossy and I need to knock it back, or I'm trying to like matte out a decal or something, you know, whatever. So, but yes, that would be my thoughts. Logan, what's your plan with the new Keeper of Secrets? Still assembling mine, and I'm waffling between color ideas. Oh, I have plans within plans, buddy. I mean, I've got 3 of them sitting beside me, so I've got lots of plans with them. So I'll probably assemble both of them as keepers, and then I'll do a shellaxy, like 2 keepers and 1 shellaxy. I'm very much looking forward to it, but I'm saving it. That's why I'm doing this other stuff first. Did the mask today. I think next up I'm gonna do this thingy. Boop. That thing. So that'll be the next project. Getting the little things out of the way first. I'm a pleasure to layer when it comes to stuff like that. Okay. Konstantinos. No problem. I'm glad it's Europe time friendly. Question about painting fully metallic models. I'm working on Kharadron Overlords. Is a Zenithal Prime still worth it? If we're talking maybe for like the Arco, because they do have a lot of pressure suits and stuff like that are still cloth, that would benefit. But for things that are like 90% metal or more, no. Like I don't Zenithal my Knight Titans skeletons, my Imperial Knights skeletons, I should say. I just do it in a glossy black, and then I put the metal, and then I Zenithal the metal over top. So you could go that direction. Like depending on how your scheme breaks out between silver and gold, you like for the guys who are more metal, especially some of the elite troops, they're just basically encased in metal. You could like Zenithal the steel, like in my Stormcast video, and then you could go in and lay the gold on top of it for your pop colors or something. I don't know what your scheme looks like, but just as a thought. Okay. Bree, what is the proprietary properties of the new contrast paint primer? I don't know that that's really more proprietary. From what I understand with the new primer, it's much finer spray and it's meant to settle more evenly, which you need for glazes. Like one of the things people don't think about with glazes is when you're doing glazes, you need an ultra smooth surface. That's why on like old garbage metal models, glazes tend to fall down and look weird because the model naturally has an uneven surface to it. So as far as I understand it, it's just supposed to be finer primer out of a rattle can so that it settles more evenly. An airbrush will always still be finer than that, period, because the particulates out of your airbrush are just going to be way teenier, tinier than what comes out of a rattle can. Charles says he's done all that still blocks. I do not know what to tell you then, buddy. Like, if I'm not in front of you, I couldn't help you from there. I do exactly what I just described and don't get blocks, so I'm not sure. Thin it more, I guess. Thin your paint more? I'm not sure. Aviad. I'm trying to add some sky earth touches to my TMM, but I keep getting artificial colored metal look when using inks to get the blue and brown. Yeah, thin the blue and brown more. You need to be extremely light touch with it. Extremely light. Like you want a straight blue, and actually like something like a sepia will work better than a brown ink. And you want it, when I say light touch, I mean like thin it as much as you think, and then thin it half again as much, right? Because it needs to be like the hint of blue and the hint of brown. It needs to, like you don't want, it shouldn't be a strong touch. When you're doing it with matte paint, you can be way more aggressive. When you're doing it with metals, if you make it that same color, it'll just look fake. So it just needs to be this very, very slight reflections. Very slight. I don't have a mustache wax. Skunk asks, I just try to keep it really trim. I keep my facial hair like this because it happened when I went bald. Like I didn't have any facial hair for most of my life. And then I turned 30 and went bald and decided that it was like, well, I was going bald since I was 20, but I decided like that's as with most men, when you lose hair up here, you got to migrate it down here to kind of balance it out. And so I just try to keep mine really trim. The reason I wear it like this though is because I don't grow these. This isn't like a willing choice. This is just, this doesn't grow. So this is what I have. So there you go. Constantinos, no metallic paints on a wet palette because water will mess it up. So how should we thin metallic paints? With thinner medium, with actual medium, not with water or flow improver, some kind of additive that will get it going. Something like that, not water. Medium is really your better bet. Let's see. Joseph, what would you recommend for making Mars Martian bases for your miniature? Yeah, I mean, he's talking about Martian Earth. Yeah, I've done a lot of Mars bases. The answer is make them less red, less fake. Using crackle paint is still good, but then also just mix in dirt and dust. Like you'd use your other Vallejo basing pastes. Do a nice mixture. The base doesn't need to be completely crackle paint or some nonsense like that. That's where it gets fake. Do it just like you would normally, but turn everything red. That is to say, think of a muddy dirt scene devoid of plant life on Earth. What would that look like? What does a wasteland on Earth look like? There's rocks and grits and sand and some of that crackle thing where the Earth has really dried out and given over completely. And all that kind of stuff. Just do that, but then tint it kind of reddish. That's really all there is to it. I like Dollar Rowney makes an ink called Red Earth. That's great. I mix it in with sepia inks and stuff like that. You don't want it to be super fake. Like I know we call it the Red Planet, but it's not, you don't want it to be actually like nuclear red or whatever. You want it to have some still natural tones in it, and that'll feel more real. Not that I know exactly what color Mars is in person. I've never been there. Might be super red. I don't know, but it feels more realistic if you have some desaturated nature to the red. But that's how I would do it. Just think wasteland on Earth, tint it red. Grassy Tiger. Hey Vince, so I'm new to modeling and I spent way too much time on a Seraphon set. Any tips you can give me before I start assembling them? Seraphon are a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, and the nice part about Seraphon is there's really not much need for sub-assemblies. They're all really open models. They're very uniform. They're a great army to start on. They take very basic techniques like washing and dry brushing really, really well. So if you're new, they're an excellent choice for an army. They have a lot of big scales and patterns. My recommendation is go look at cool other models. Spend a fair amount of time Googling and just image searching other Lizardmen and Seraphon armies and look at color schemes you like, because you have a lot of leeway to play there. You can be really bright, you can be really colorful, you can do natural stripes and stuff like that. Seraphon are great for like zenithaling and doing glazes over the top to get your colors down, and then doing some natural patterning, doing some dry brushing, tinting the scales a different color. So just play around and have fun would be my recommendation. They're an army that you can paint quickly, but also to a relatively high level. So just look at and find a color scheme you like and have fun, experiment. But you shouldn't need to worry about much. You should be able to basically assemble them all the way because they don't have much in the way of like challenging sub-assemblies. They're very uniform, open models. They're great to paint. All right. Sorry, I had to take a drink here. Dario, what would you say is the optimal sequence and correct tools to clean and prepare resin kits to a state of paintability? Oh boy. Okay, let me walk through it in my head here, what we do with resin. So I get it out And the first thing I will do is actually take all the pieces off of whatever spruing they're on and do a light scrape of everything. Then I will go and soak them in soapy water, give them a quick scrub, let them dry out. Then I come back and I get all the other lines off that you can. Figure out if there's any big defects. Resin can often have holes and stuff like that in it, so figure out if that's present. A little bit of perfect putty is your best friend for that kind of stuff. What's this? Perfect putty from Deluxe Materials. Okay. It's really good stuff. It can be used with water, and you can brush it, and you can sand it. It hardens really nicely. So I do that to cover everything. Then you assemble everything, do another putty, sand it off. So some kind of low grit sandpaper or high grit sandpaper, 400, 800 for finishing. I go to the auto parts store, get a real high grit sandpaper. They have lots of super high grit sandpapers at the auto parts store. I mean, you get like 1200, 1600 grit because it's meant for, car paint. But I keep 400 and 800. That's a really useful thing. And yeah, and then you're good to go. That's sort of my thoughts. Quality of the resin can vary a lot. I mean, resin itself there's no one resin. There's lots of different resin mixtures. So the quality you get out of it is hugely varied. Liquid Sword says natural sand with a few small pebbles from your yard have been my go-to for 22 years. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, taking stuff from nature is not wrong. 100%. Like, there's no reason not to go out and get rocks and stuff and dirt and little sticks and all these kinds of things from nature. Sure. I would generally avoid pure, like, leafy plant material. That will tend to go bad, as it were, a little quicker. But things like sticks and stuff, you can just dry them out and they're good to go. Dave, yes, I'm going to try out the contrast paints. Let's see. Pure Boss. Vince, have just this week discovered your videos, getting back in the hobby after a 17-year hiatus, and you found the information helpful. Well, that's awesome, man. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Well, very good. If you need anything, that's why we do this. I'm here to help, and I hope this is all helpful. I like it a lot. I love teaching. It's just fun to share this stuff, and I hope I'm helping people paint more. I guess that's ultimately what I want, because I like looking at other people's painted stuff. I think it's really cool, and I love this community, and I want to see us all be confident with the paint we apply and take our next steps. Okay. Geldomol. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Hey, Vince, how do you handle plastic and resin models that have weird deformities where they altered the mini to work in the casting process? Yeah, you mean like something's bent out of shape, I assume? You got a couple different answers. Heat gun, hair dryer, near boiling water. All of those things. You can use any of them. But the point is, you heat it way up, then you bend it back into shape, and then you let it cool. If you're feeling real saucy, you can keep a bowl of icy water next to it. You bend it back into shape, dunk it. It's locked into place. But yeah, you can get little heat guns off Amazon and stuff that are just kind of like they're a heat gun. They make hot. Yeah, but a hairdryer will work too, as long as it's got a nice high setting on it. Just be careful with it, because if you get it too hot, you will melt the plastic. So you got to be or resin. So you got to be a little careful. Eketilos. I don't know. I'm bad with names. I'll just ask your question. Hello, and thanks for doing this. How do you find the drive to paint some models you have to paint but are bored to do so? Well, I don't do that very often, to be completely honest. I try to follow my passion, but I assume you mean your army painting, and there's something in the army you don't want to paint, right? We've all run into that. For my real passion projects, like for competition or something, I only paint what I want to. I don't ever paint anything just because I think it'll do well. That's why I'm very choosy about my competition models, because I'm trying to find something that I think will do well, but that I'm also like really excited to paint, that I love, and I love the sculpt. But we've all been up against stuff where we're like, I don't want to paint this. I mean, part of the answer is you just do it. You hammer through, like buckle down. You know what I mean? Like, do you want to play this game or not? Do you want to have this army or not? Sometimes life is pain. It would be part of my answer, right? Like, that is to say, you've got to steel your spine a little. I don't want to go to the dentist, but I also like having teeth in my head. There's a lot of things I do for my wife that I don't exactly love, but I like being married and I love her. So, like life is sometimes full of things we don't want to do, and we just must grit our teeth and soldier through. But platitudes and unhelpful solipsisms aside, the answer is I put something that I really want to do after it. This is how I do. Like, so I go for the reward mechanism. Or I find something so I'll talk about two different tactics. So for example, I'm not super excited to paint this thing. Like, it's okay. These girls have some really dumb faces. I'm going to change, but like, this is okay. Nothing about this model blows my skirt up. I'm excited to have it. I think it's cool. I like everything Slaanesh, but it's not like the thing I'm most excited for. But I know what's waiting on the other side of this is a Keeper of Secrets. So I will paint this. It was the same thing when I did when I repainted my Slaanesh. Oops, sorry, wrong way. When I repainted my Slaanesh, I saved like the big demons for after I got through the 30-day minutes. So that was my reward. That's option one. Here's option two. Do something different with them. Use it as a learning experience. So instead of just being like, I've got to paint these and trying to make it as fast as possible, by making it more rote, you're making it harder on yourself. So instead, do something crazy. Pick a different color, or if it's in an army scheme and you can't do that, pick a different technique. Add some freehand. Try something different with your metals. Try a new paint. Experiment with a new brush. Like, whatever. Do something that makes it novel, right? Because there's nothing worse than doing a thing you don't want to do that's also boring. It's like filling out your taxes or something, right? But if you can intermix it with an experience that's novel and new and learning, and you feel like you're growing by doing it, I think that can be a great tactic to make the experience more pleasurable and get you through to the other side. So I hope one of those three things helps. Bree, best glue to use, assemble, painted sub-assemblies. If it's plastic, I just use plastic glue still. I use Revel. This is my favorite plastic glue. So I just use that. No big deal. What I'll usually do is on parts where I'm going to sub-assembly, where the join is, I take a little piece of silly putty and I keep it on there the whole time. So that way, when I take off the silly putty to assemble it, it's still a plastic against plastic joint. But I mean, plastic putty will destroy paint. So you want to be, as usual, be careful with it. But generally the joints are obviously hidden because they're joins. So that's usually what I use. Wow, Trello Huntery. I recently tried loaded brush, but what I ended up with is a good start with white and then a gray to black gradient, but with a complete white line in the middle. Can't figure out what's wrong. Complete white line in the middle. Sure, I'll tell you what happened. What happened is you had your brush and there was white up here and your belly was full of some other paint, and you were doing this. You're going back and forth on the area, and then you rotated your brush, and some piece, like the thicker white paint, you had still a piece of it back here. And when your brush rotated slightly, it went zoop and left that line. You need to make sure that you are rotating your brush while you're moving. Let me also say something about loaded brush. It's not meant to be a finisher. It's meant to just get you going. So, like, let's go back to this thing. See this mirror? Like, I started that mirror with loaded brush. Let me walk you through how I did that mirror. This down here is what I'm referencing. I started with a little loaded brush. Then I did a wet blend over the top. Then I did a couple glazes. And then I finished it with the airbrush. So there were 4 steps in getting that smooth, right? To go from white to black. I think it came out pretty darn smooth. So like loaded brush is just meant to be a thing that's on the way. And if you've got a little white scratch, just do another one over top. Just do it again. Sometimes I'll apply my loaded brushes 3 or 4 times before I'm happy with how they transitioned. It's a rough process. It's an organic process. It's never going to be perfect because it's kind of random, right? There you go. Hope that helps. My wife wants to know how you would paint detailed wolf teeth on a 28mm figure. She's painting a Cameronian Highlander from Infinity. Sure. I mean, like, same as any other teeth, I guess is the answer. But dark brown or something at the top, transitioning down to a mid-tone, and then with a very thin, sharp paint, you take white and you striate it. Right? So, in other words, you want a nice transition from a darker brown or something like that. It doesn't have to be brown. It can be any freaking color. Something dark up to a mid-tone white, like let's say a pale sand or an ivory. And then you take like ivory plus a little white and you just do some thin striations toward the tip of the teeth. And that'll generally give you a good toothy effect for a natural wolfy creature. I hope that makes sense. When I say thin striations, I mean vertical. Like if this is the tooth, right? So it would go dark, some dark brownish color, transition through down to like ivory. And then I would take my brush and I would draw a vertical striation here and here and here and pull them toward the point. Hope that helps. What's that Slaanesh mirror can be used in 40K also. Oh, yeah, this thing? Sure. Yeah. All my demons, I sometimes use them in 40K as well. Yes. Hello, Andrew. Let's see. Charles, do you think the spare keeper bits would combine well with the Gorgon to make another keeper on the cheap? Yeah, probably. I mean, I haven't done it yet, but probably. I have an extra Gorgon. I'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens. Why not more keepers? You could make one more in the style of Inkari or whatever, right? The old, like that old picture of, I think it was Inkari fighting the High Elf Lord on the cliffside. I think you could do that. Yeah. Again, they seem to be about in the same scale. I have a lot of Gorgons too. That's like 3 or 4 Gorgons back there. I like that model. I have another one still in the bits from a start collecting. I'll give it a shot. I'll see what happens. I like big monsters. I hate painting infantry, but I love painting big monsters. I just think they're fun. Eric. Ooh, lost you for a second, Eric. Hold on. Scanning back. There you go. Okay. Considering entering Crystal Brush next year. Well, I would say it's not going to happen for you because there is no Crystal Brush next year. That got canceled. There is, however, a Golden Demon at Adepticon next year. So I will proceed as though you're asking me. I'm thinking about entering Golden Demon next year. I'm not a great painter. I'm just doing it to really challenge myself. You're going to do a bust. Well, again, there's no bust at Golden Demon. So there you go. So I would now painting a bust. You could take it to something like Nova. Gen Con has a bust category. There's a couple other competitions that do. But, you know, for painting a bust, yeah, I would recommend my like bust painting 101 video that goes into it for a very long time in ways that I couldn't summarize here, but I will summarize in this way. Painting a bust is a very different experience. You need to pay much more attention to your volumes and you need to take everything way farther. If you paint a bust to the same level of detail you paint a 28mm miniature, it's going to look bad. Everything needs to go farther. Detail. More color, more volumes, more environmental effects, more everything. That's the secret to busts. More texture, more color, more tone, more volumes, more highlights, more shadows, more everything. More. But at any rate, you know, there's no more Crystal Brush. That's gone now. Brian, would you recommend oil paints as the only paint type for someone who do mostly organic monsters? And are the metallic oil paints good? No, I would not. Unless you're like if you can, if you want. There are people who paint oil, like who paint, you know, models with oils, but it's a very different experience. I would certainly probably not recommend them as your main paint. If you're like James Waffle or somebody and you want to go that direction, you could, but I would still recommend acrylics. I use oils for some finishing stuff. You can do that. So you can lay down, you know, if you want to do more interesting tones and shadows and things, that you can certainly do. But I would still put an acrylic base down and then varnish it and then use oils to add shade or highlight or stuff like that if you want to go that direction. I wouldn't, and I would do, let's call it 60% of the work with acrylics, varnish it, and then do the last 40% with oils. Just because there are elements of oils that are going to be harder to do. There's also just going to be some stuff that's very tricky. As far as oil metallics, I haven't really used them, but they are not, I would highly doubt they will be good for our purposes here because they are meant for a very different scale, namely canvas. Whereas when you're dealing with metal paints at a miniature level, you need pigment ground to like almost the molecular level. And that's just, there's no reason to grind metallic pigment in an oil that far. You don't need it. If you're painting on a 2D canvas, who cares? You look at it from 6 feet away, not an inch. All right. But again, I haven't used it. That's just theory. Okay. Charles Alt. How would you do a grayish Skaven tail? I would paint it gray. I don't know. Add in a little pink, little red, little magenta, something like that. Like give it a bit of a hue of blood still, but you can make it grayish. I would honestly push it toward a deeper, almost like mix in a little bit of Caribou Crimson or Reichland Fleshade or something, but use mostly gray. Push your highlight to almost a pure gray, and that's how I would do it. Like just paint the segments. I'm not sure what else you'd want. Tails, Skaven tails are a lot of fun. You just kind of wet blend out a long tail, then you paint the little segment. You put something slightly darker in the little rivets. I'm sorry, in the little dividing line segments, and then you just do a little highlight along the top back of each tail segment, and job's a good one. Let's see. All right. All right. What's a good way to sculpt hair with green stuff? Well, I'll tell you what. That's a very complicated question. I'm not going to be able to answer here. There's a couple good tutorials. There's a small channel from a buddy of mine named Marok, Marrok, Marok Wolf, and he has a great tutorial on kind of hair and fur. Check that out. But it's more a matter of like you're putting the green stuff on and then you're sort of slicing it into the hair is the basic answer. If you're going for like human hair, if you're going for like fur, you can roll out snakes. You can do green stuff snakes, really thin snakes. So does everybody know what I mean by snakes? Like just you take up some green stuff and you roll it way down on the paper or on your thing. You roll out snakes and you can slice them and you can just keep laying them in there one on top of each other, and that'll give you like spiky fur. But that would be my recommendation. It's a fairly tough thing to sculpt well. Enoch, hey Vince, I'm starting a dark elf army and I want to do a cream-like color for the main parts of the armor. Which colors would you use for this? I mainly use war colors and Vallejo. Cream-like color. War colors ochre 1 is really nice. It's not actually called this, but random tan, radome tan, or something like that. Radome. I don't know why. I don't know what that means, but this one from Model Air is a really nice color for that. Light brown from Vallejo is really good for that. And then probably like a maybe like a pale sand or something like that at the highlight. If you're willing to dip into scale 75, something like a Mojave white or a birch would be really awesome. Yeah, that's probably something in that range. Maybe a touch of pure white at the highest highlights at like just your 1% of the surface area type of thing, or edges or stuff. Okay, so Geldema has a clarification there. Not warping, but spots where, for example, if a figure is holding a weapon close to his side, the weapon fuses to the body, making a wall of plastic resin. I try not to paint anything that's like that. I hate stuff like that. That's a short answer to your question. I mean, if it's actually fused in there and it's not supposed to be, you're done. Get rid of the kit. If that's part of it because the figure is just badly sculpted and that's how that's done, where things are like implanted like that, then the answer is you need to like blackline everything in some kind of sense. Like you can't fix it in prep. You just have to fix it in paint and make sure there's like nice dark lines separating everything. That's the best answer I can give, unfortunately. Adam, hey Vince, any idea how to remove badly laid primer from a plastic miniature? Only ultrasonic cleaner. Purple power, greens, like simple green. You know, those are generally my stripping agents. I like purple power because simple green has a really awful smell. Like, it just smells like death. But I like purple power. They're both about the same. If it's a metal fig, you can use much heavier stuff. But if it's plastic, you have to use. Oh yeah, you said plastic figure. Yeah, I use purple power and an ultrasonic cleaner. That works. Comes right off. Grab a toothbrush, scrapey, done and dusted. But my question is like, is there anything else? Like, you can also use you can use a little bit of like alcohol to pull it off as well, like to get those last pieces out. Like, if you have 99% isopropyl alcohol, that won't hurt the plastic, but will kind of help loosen and soften the paint quite a bit. So things like that. Let's see. Marcus, how do you keep your metallic paint shiny after a varnish? I don't varnish metals. I've said this in many videos, but I'll say it again. I do not varnish metals. Don't varnish your metals. You shouldn't varnish metals. Varnishing metals is ruining metals. Your next question is going to be, but then Vince, how do you keep your metals from chipping? I don't know what you people are doing with your figures. If there are metal figures underneath, then gloss varnish the whole thing and then put the metal paint over the top. So that way there's a solid thing underneath for it to attach to. Like, if I had a metal figure I was worried about chipping, I would matte paint the whole thing. I would gloss varnish it. I would matte that all out. Then I would paint the metal paints, any metal parts. And it's fine. You have a full thick layer there. Stop using foam to transport your miniatures. That's a bad thing to do. I do not know how this became popular. It's just like an invitation to scrape your miniatures. You know what I really love next to my carefully painted miniatures? Something with an extremely high friction coefficient that I'm going to then shake around a whole lot. Was sandpaper not available to transport our miniatures? I'm not sure. Use a magnet tray. Like, I have the fiddliest miniatures. I don't varnish my metal at all. I've never had scrapes. All this stuff. I just put it in a mag tray. You can get there's lots of different mag rack companies now and stuff like that. If you want the cheap option, here's how I transported my miniatures for years. I went to, some superstore, Target or something. I bought myself a couple plastic tubs. They cost maybe $4, $5. Then I went to the cooking section and I bought myself some flat cooking sheets, like iron steel cooking sheets, like the things you make cookies on. And I then went back and I glued those in the bottom of the thing. And then I put my metal, then I magnetized, then I put magnets on the bottom of my miniatures and I put it on there. And I've never chipped or broken a miniature in transport. And that was a solution that cost me maybe $10 to transport my armies. So don't varnish your metals. That was a long rant. I have a big thing about this. Yeah, you hit a thorn in my paw there, clearly. But yeah, don't varnish your metals. Okay. Let's see. Angry Banner, any tips for painting very dark or black armor? Yeah, don't do it, because it's pretty much going to be the worst. Like, it's a recipe for boring armor. Black armor is more or less like the worst type of armor because it just looks flat. Black is the opposite of color. It's the absence of color. Literally, it's the absence of color. To make black interesting takes a lot of work. You got to do slow blends up to certain things, up to like pop colors and reflection points, which means you're running from black to white. So you're literally inviting the longest, slowest, most difficult blend. I have 0 black armor in any case. I've got 12 armies painted. I have no figs in black armor. That should tell you how I feel about it. And I mean, I can't even imagine how many figs are in this room. Now, if you're going to do it, if you're like, but Vince, I really want to do Black Templars or the Black Legion or something like that, I'm sympathetic. Let me see if I can help. So here's how I do it when I have to do it. I still zenithal the thing, and then I make a glaze out of some Payne's Gray and a little bit of black ink. I thin it way down, like 9:1, 10:1. And then either with the airbrush or brush, I then glaze away from the light source. So imagine this is the surface of the armor, and I've zenithaled it. So this is white going down to the black, standard zenithal. I'll take the glaze with my airbrush and I'll spray in this direction and in this direction. and I'll just let it dry. I do it again. I let it dry. I do it again. I let it dry. And then I'll put a little white dot here for a light point, and I'll glaze it again, call it a day. That'll give you something kind of interesting looking. Because you'll have this transition. The panes will give you this like slight blue tint. That's my best advice. It can be pretty fast. It's probably the only fast way to paint black armor. But yeah, black armor is generally terrible. So many people like to paint it, and it just is the opposite of visually interesting. It's passing the least amount of visual information to the eye. So there you go. But I hope that helps. That glaze trick is probably your best trick, because then at least you're giving some blue, some gray, some whites. You've created visual interest there. Matt Orton. He's painting Emmerich on Dragon. All right, sweet. That's a cool model. Last year from GW and made to order. Mix of metal and plastic. What's the best thing to use to stop it from chipping? Everything I just said. What I just said. Paint all the matte stuff. Gloss varnish it, matte varnish that, then paint your metals last. You'll be good. You want to coat a gloss varnish on metals somewhere. You just need to use matte varnish to get rid of the shine, because you don't want to end with that. And that'll give you a nice layer. Hopefully that helps. Michael Anderson. Is it better to start with a mid-tone and then add shadows and highlights, or to start with a dark tone and work up to the lighter? Yes. It's better to do the one that fits your style and the way you're painting. Let me see if I can unpack that more. If I were using thick layers, layer painting, you probably could start with the darkest and work up to the lightest. So Dr. Faust classically paints like this, and that's fine. That's sort of how he does it. I start with the mid-tone and then shade and highlight. But that's because I tend to use a lot of glazes, either through the brush or the airbrush, and a lot of wet blending and stuff like that. So I'll tell you the real answer. The real answer is neither. The right answer is to start with a wet blend and include everything. That's your right answer. And then you push the highlights and shadows darker, and job's a good one. How about that? But the point is, there is no right answer, right? You can do it. It's whatever style suits you and whatever method you think works. But like, I really wish people, the way people should learn to start painting is wet blending. We shouldn't teach people in the way we do, of like the base coat, wash, dry brush / thing, whatever. We teach people that because it's very foolproof, but it's teaching you sort of bad lessons, because the much easier way to establish initial contrast is if people were comfortable with wet blending right out of the gate. Like think of the way Bob Ross sets up his palette or his canvas when he's starting out with the backgrounds. Does he lay down a base coat and then start? No. Like, it's not how he paints. He wet blends the crap out of it. It's wet on wet. That's literally the whole thing. And he's just like, starts getting colors on there, starts blending it together, gets some clouds, soften them. Just 2 hairs and some air, right? So like, if we all learned like that, our lives would probably be a lot easier along the painting journey, but here we are. But in the end, you have to do the one that's right for you. They are all valid, and you can go any direction as long as it's matching your style. Charles, what's a good method for a very quick bone? Watch my bone video. I've got a couple different videos on bone. I mean, the short answer is bone is very simple. It just needs to go from dark to ivory. So the simplest possible bone, painted ivory, and then use successive washes covering less space toward the dark area. That's the easiest answer. Very good. Charles, he's got 3 Gorgons. Yeah, cool. Oh, very good. All right. Oh, yes. Okay. Hi, Charlie. Alan, let's see. All right. Oh, so Alan's asking about Golden Demon and like, should you go into it if you feel like you're not a great painter? Yeah, sure. Why not? You should always compete. You should definitely compete. It's going to be an insane year. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Plan on this year's Golden Demon being madness, utter and complete madness, because there hasn't been a Golden Demon here for 6 years. Sounds right. 2013. And so everybody wants some. I want some too. But the point is that like, it's going to be very, very, very busy. I kind of hope they set the timing of it up differently so they allow more time for feedback for people. But yeah, it's always worth competing and getting feedback from your fellow painters, participating. It's a lot of fun. And there's nothing wrong with it. And the reality is, if you're just starting at that level, or you're just starting to think about competition, Golden Demon has, this whole finalist round thing. So go for the finalist pin and get feedback. And that's a hugely valuable learning experience. If you can talk to judges, talk to other painters about your pieces, maybe score a pin or make that your goal. That's a great couple days for sure, and will really help you grow. Nothing helped me grow faster than competing and getting my teeth kicked in. I'll say that. You don't have to think about it like that, but my point is that, like, losing is a great way to learn how to win. Let me say it that way. All right. Will you be doing a video on painting tartan patterns? Anything's possible. We'll see if I ever paint a model that has a tartan pattern. I don't I don't like tartan patterns very much. But maybe if it ever comes up. I don't do a lot of historical stuff, so there's not as much call for it, but who knows? I don't know. Maybe. I can add it to the list and think about it. What is, in your opinion, the best mix to thin scale color paints to try to get rid of the gel-like viscosity? Make work color matte other than varnish. Best mix to thin scale color. Why would you want to? I don't want to make them act like those other paints. I want them to act like the gel paint, so I can paint on the mini and wet blend them. That's how they're designed. Now, that being said, if you want to smooth them out, water in any kind of medium will work. Martian, like, the reality is you don't need nothing else tricky about it. I thin out most of mine with, let's say, 90% water, maybe a little flow improver. A little flow improver can help. It's a good way to get it going. A little flow aid, flow improver, something like that. But yeah, nothing else tricky about it. Watercolor, some of it's very matte, some of it's very not. Depends on the paint line, the exact pigment. You can mix in a little, like, take some AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, as I mentioned, the best varnish in the world. There's no reason you can't mix this into your paints. It's just acrylic. I mix this into paint all the time. If I've got a paint that's too glossy, I just mix this in. I use this as my medium. Done. Job's a good one. Paint super matte. Just that easy. So that's my best advice. Sorry, I had to open my soda and I didn't want to crack anybody's ears. Okay. That's nice. Okay, so Grant says in relation to the oil question before, he recommends using the Avalon 502 oils. Yes. Thank you, Grant. That's really wonderful. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Those are really good oils. I love those for miniature painting. Again, I use them mostly as, let's call it the final 40% or finishing, but those are awesome oils. I would also recommend the oil brushers. So those come in little, like, lipstick things. I've had a lot of really positive experiences with those too. Thank you, Grant, for triggering my memory. That's a really great point. Okay. Let's see. Hi, Vince. For your AK varnish, do you use an airbrush or regular brush? Yes. As I just mentioned, you can use it with either. Standard left. Okay. Get $1 foam sponges, cut out very neat little space your minis, put in box. Yeah, I don't like it standard left. That's just asking for something to get rubbed. Like, when you transport something on a magnet, your mini does not touch anything. It touches air. And again, like I said, I built mine for seriously maybe $5. Those, like, you can go to the dollar store and get those cookie trays. You can get that Tupperware stuff for a couple bucks. Your minis will never touch another thing. The more your minis touch things, the more you're chancing paint to rub off, no matter how soft it is. Okay. Trying to pick a color scheme for your Admech army. Dirty gray for the main coats and armor, and a sort of orange-red for the undercoats. I mean, sure. Like, dirty gray for the main coats. I don't like dirty gray for main colors. It's a boring thing, especially with all the steel they have on them. I would flip-flop it. Orange as your main color. Like, if you have a bunch of metal and then you do gray, your models are just going to be gray. So, like, I would think of a bright color. The best Admech I see are usually those that use where the coats are some bright striking color, and that stands out really well against the metal. Orange is really nice because then you can use a little blue in your steel. You get that nice complementary play. Orange is good. I would flip-flop that. Let's see. Okay. Any experience with dismantling a model that's been really badly put together with plastic glue? Plastic glue? No, you can't. You're not going to really get it back apart. Plastic glue is a chemical reaction. It melts the plastic. That's it. I mean, you can break it, but you're not going to get it back apart. If it's CA glue, super glue, yeah, put it in the freezer for a little while. That'll make the glue very brittle, and then you can just crack it. Mentioned the oblong paint. I don't know how to say that stuff. The 502s. I mentioned those. I do not know how to pronounce that word. Okay. Yeah, he says he turned his renegade armigers into world eaters, so they had color. Yeah, that's the right choice. World eaters are cooler, anyways. Airbrushing for years, only been using a respirator. Do you think it's necessary to get a spray booth, or am I okay with just a mask? I mean, I'll give you the honest answer. I don't ever wear a mask. I just run my spray booth. Like, I have a little booth in the back. I just use that. I never wear a mask. But you should, like, I guess. Well, let me say it this way. If you're doing anything but acrylics, you have to wear a mask. If you're going to do enamels or anything like that, you have to wear a mask, period. That's not joking around. That stuff is toxic. So don't play around with stuff like that. With acrylics, I don't wear a mask, but I would recommend you do it. Do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. But it's up to you. You can decide your own level. But I like having the booth better, and with the ventilator at the back to just kind of suck the air away. Because what I don't like is just clouds in the air. So this gets rid of everything, and I find that much less of a challenge. That is a good point. Standard Left, he said black armor is all about the contrasting colors next to it. Black as a interesting accent color to make other things stand out more. That I will support. Yes, I'm in my head. Standard, I'm thinking all like all black armor, like Black Legion style or something. But that's a fair point. It can be a really great thing to make other things pop more. Matt O'Brien started watching your videos about a year ago, and his painting has improved. Awesome, glad to hear it. What about a very dark? Oh, Angry Banner. What about a very dark black metallic armor for Iron Jaws? I mean, same thing is going to happen again. It's all the same. Doesn't matter if it's metal or not. It's, it's all going to be like that. If you're going to do very dark metal, then weather the heck out of it. Add in browns and oranges and rust is my recommendation. I don't love metal Iron Jaws. I think it tends to look the nature of that surface actually doesn't take metal paint super great. But if I was going to do it, I would take some Vallejo metal color, steel or magnesium, mix in a little black ink, do that, and then take like something like a pale burnt metal, work it way down into a very light dry brush, and then I would weather it pretty significantly around the shadow areas, like put in some browns and oranges. That would add color to it. That would be my tactic, but your mileage may vary. Matt O'Brien, question is, how would you approach painting porcelain? It's tough. I've never been super happy with any porcelain I painted. My best advice is because what you probably mean is polished porcelain, right? As opposed to something that's just sort of like because porcelain is just the material, but then you varnish it and you put that stuff over it and it makes it very shiny, right? So I assume that's what you actually mean, not like just the clay itself, as it were. And yeah, I mean, the answer is a little satin varnish over something can go a long way. Probably the easiest method, rather than trying to place very careful like light points everywhere. My answer would probably be satin varnish. I like using very naturalistic colors and then giving it a slight satin sheen, because you don't want to gloss it. That's not how it is. It's not glossy. It's satin. It has a sheen to it. So I guess that'd be my best advice. Play around with that some. You could even mix a little bit of the satin varnish into your other paints. See if that helps a little. I will admit I'm just guessing here. I haven't tried. I've always just done clay because I've never been happy with any of my attempts at porcelain, to be completely honest. Which is ironic because the keeper that I'm going to paint, somebody asked about that earlier. She's going to be the I'm going to call her the visage, and there's a porcelain thing in there in the book that's really cool that I already had kind of an idea for when I saw that they had the similar idea in the book. I was real excited. So you'll see whenever I get it done. What's a good tip for keeping a good tip on your brushes? Clean them regularly. Keep some of this stuff around or something like it. You can use any of these. I really like this new stuff. The Gentastics Drunken Brush Goop is good. You can also use the old tried and true Masters brush cleaner. Clean them. Don't use your good brushes for washes or metal paints or anything that's going to damage them. Don't let, this is not a nice brush. This is a crappy brush. See this darkness that's down here? That's because I get thick, gloopy, and or very thin paint. Either are the destroyer of brushes down in the ferrule. Once paint gets down here, your tip's gone. Don't rub your brushes too hard. Don't stab directly at it. Roll to the side. Touch more lightly. You don't need to touch your brush very hard to your miniature to make the paint come off. Yeah, there you go. All that stuff. Thomas Berg, painting a L'Oreal. Heck yeah. That's such a fun fig to paint. Okay. Alan says it will be Warhammer Fest UK for me on 2020. Well, very good. Well, I'll see you there then. I'm coming back over for that next year. Mickey R, which 5 brushes should you own? Well, you can watch the video that just came out 17 minutes ago, and you'll know about the 5 brushes you should own. Is there any way to fix a synthetic brush that has J-hooked? You can try to reshape it with cleaner. You let the cleaner really soak into it, and then try to reshape it, and then kind of wash it out afterward. Take some masters and work it in there into the bristles and actually reshape it. Let it almost dry and then reliquidate it. It's the best advice. If it's really hooked like that, chances are that the answer is throw it in the trash. But I mean, if it's a synthetic brush, you shouldn't be too concerned about it. I mean, this is how I buy my synthetic brushes. This is like $10. I actually just got it today, and it's just a bunch more of these. Just buy them in big packs, then throw them in the trash. Who cares? That's just some pack on Amazon. Preferred method of weathering tanks or armor? A lot. I have a lot of different methods for that. Oil paints, AK streaking grime is really good. Pigments. I mean, there's a million things you can weather tanks and armor with. I have a couple of videos on it. The answer is don't hold back. There's a lot of different fun things you can do. Play with all of them. I've got a couple different things on doing streaks and battle damage and weathering, so I would recommend you check out those videos. I use oil paints and stuff like that in there. Oils are ultimately my favorite because I find them the most controllable, and I can sort of mix my own. But the AK interactive stuff is really good too. Okay, so we went much longer than an hour, and I need to wrap this up soon. So we're gonna go into lightning round. Here we go, lightning round time. Brian, I've seen people who do busts use a bit of clear resin for the eyes once they've painted. I've never tried it. You could certainly do it. Yeah, cover it in a little clear coat of something to add that extra sheen. I've never tried it. I don't know that it's really necessary. I think if you create the color well enough, the eyes should sell. I don't gloss coat gems. You can sell it with a transition. And anytime you put something on that's gonna interact with light differently than the paint itself, you run a little bit of a risk of it looking weird. When glazing, how do you avoid the line of paint from where you initially start the brush stroke, especially when glazing dark colors over light? You glaze down, you wipe your brush off on a paper towel, or you clean it out, you eat the paint, and then you go back to the end and you feather the end of it. Cujo Painting actually just put up a video where he does this exact thing. He recently did a basing video. If you watch toward the beginning, he feathers a glaze out to do exactly what I'm describing. So if you want to see it in action, he does it multiple times very clearly. So that would be my advice there. Joseph says he and his wife paint together and listen and watch the videos. Well, that's awesome, man. That's great. That's super cool. I hope it's useful, and that sounds wonderful. Okay. Let's see. Oh yes, Mickey R. Yeah, sure. The AK Interactive True Metal range that are in a wax medium. Yeah, not acrylic. Those are really interesting. I like those. They are buffable, which is cool. But yes, they are a very different thing. Thoughts on the new upcoming Scale 75 artist colors? I'll tell you once I have them. I did back the Kickstarter so I could review them. But I mean, I already use a lot of heavy body acrylics, and they're just heavy body acrylics for the most part. I think that they, obviously they have some different mixture to them. I got them because I'm interested to see what the difference is. I'll do a review of them when I get mine. I suppose with magnetic trays is they become less stable over time. I haven't seen any problem. Like I said, I mean, a cookie sheet glued to the bottom of a Tupperware thing doesn't really become less stable. It's pretty stable. And if you want to make sure the magnets never come off the bottom, you roll out a little green stuff. You glue the magnet down, and then you just put a little tiny hook of green stuff around the side. And that thing will stay there for a long time to come. When you're cleaning varnish from your airbrush, does no normal paint cleaner work? Yep, do the exact same thing. I do literally exactly the process I described earlier in the video for varnish and everything else I do. Rerolling ones never wear a mask. Yes, indeed. I love the mask. I've painted the mask 4 times. I better like her. Oh, yeah, there you go, Max. Max says that like on Iron Jaws, doing things like checks and dags. That's a great call out. Yes. Some freehand or stuff like that can break it up. Black is okay as a good base for freehand. I'm all right with that. That I dig. Rerolling ones, Jack. Question, I'm interested in taking your class in Olympia. Well, yeah, come on, man. Let's do this. Besides the fee, what else is required? Airbrush paints. Okay, so I'm teaching in Olympia next month. I'm doing the Imperial Knight class. Even if you're not super interested in robots, the reality is it's a great class. We cover almost everything from metals to weathering to a lot of the stuff I've talked about. It's a really, really fun class because I get to cover everything. What's necessary? Yeah, the fee to sign up, which the link, if you're interested, will be in the description when I post this video. Yeah, you don't really, I mean, some kind of paints, but I'll have a bunch of paint for you. So whatever, like I'll have paints and inks and stuff you can use. So you do need an airbrush, and you do need some kind of rope it. So you have to get some kind of Imperial Knight, or some analogous thing. Like I've had people bring like the Corn Lord of Skulls before, or Chaos Knights, and that's all fine. But anything, that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. We provide everything else for you. So show up with like a knight and an airbrush, maybe a few paints you really like, and you're pretty much good to go. There's a little list. Like, you can bring some little cleaning bottles and stuff like that, but all that stuff can be provided if you don't have it. Sam, your Slaanesh is purple and dark blue. Well, actually, they're purple, pink, and dark blue, but sure. What made you paint them like this? That's a good question. I don't know. I wanted to break up. I originally had them back in the day as just purple and pink. I added the blue because I wanted a nice pop electric color. I like synthwave. I think synthwave colors are the best colors, and dark purple, pink, and electric blue are synthwave colors. And if anybody is super synth, it's going to be Slaanesh. Is there any more 80s idea than Slaanesh? Is there any more great, like, 80s decade of excess Slaanesh? It all works out. Grimlock. After painting the rims of my minis black, should I go over them with a gloss varnish to protect the paint from chipping, or do you think it'll be fine? I would just leave it how it is. I don't varnish the base rims. So, I mean, unless it happens to get varnished because I sprayed everything else or something, but nah. Just black. It's fine. You're good. What's your favorite material for making banners? Styrene sheet with a heat gun, Coke can, green stuff. Yeah, like plasticard styrene with a heat gun. That's the answer. You can really shape it out. I like that. I've never liked the Coke can thing. It's kind of a cool thing, but it's really sharp. I tend to cut myself a lot, and you always have like some kind of inconsistencies in there. Like it's not as smooth as I would like. Styrene, I think, is the right way to go. Let's see. Sam Goose, sorry, not dark blue, but like red, purple, and blues. What do you think of regular light pink and gray style? I like the normal colors, just fine. The new book has a lot of really interesting color schemes in them. I think Slaanesh just needs to be bright. Doesn't matter. You can use almost any color, but it needs to be extreme and bright and saturated. Never knew metallic paint damages your brushes. Oh, yes, it does. You're putting tiny razor blades into your paint brushes. Thousands and thousands of tiny razor blades. Jacob, do you know any good tools to find in-person mini painting classes? Wow, there really should be a single directory for this. Wouldn't that be cool? But no, I don't know of anything. I mean, CK Studios, my link down below. We teach all over the country. Caleb and Kat's studio, myself and the other instructors. So Sam and Justin and Devin and Dev, as well as Caleb himself and Kat, obviously. But and then there's like Miniature Monthly teaches around a lot, so you can check their site. I don't have any singular source. Kind of just watch Facebook, I guess. It's my best answer. Like it is. You kind of have to follow the painters who talk about their own classes, I guess. Yeah. Asteroid TV. What's your favorite Seraphon mini? Oh, good question. Probably a big Carnosaur thing. That dino's. That's a cool. It's a big T-Rex. It's pretty sweet, right? T-Rexes are cool. So yeah, big dino. Second place being the fat frog. That fat frog is just funny. He's hilarious. Ruben says he enjoyed the video, Sam. Keep doing more. Don't worry, I will. Best wash for red. Depends on what you want. Either a brownish wash or a purplish wash, depending on whether you want brown red or purple red. But so that means Druchii. If you're asking me like literally the existing shade colors, then Druchii Violet or probably Agrax, because it's the only one dark enough, is your answer there. Make sure you keep it smooth. Don't let it gather on any large flats, because it will stain and very much show on red. Jeremy says he got the new Creature Caster Monument paint set and he's loving it. Yep, me too. I've been using them a ton. Max says Typhus Corrosion destroys brushes. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, Call to Paint does. Because, yes, it has anything that has, like, pigment in it, physical material in it, will beat your brushes up. Red Mage Ultra. When painting with metallics, do you need to prime the figure in gloss black like Vallejo suggested doing their tutorials? Do you need to? No. Can it help? Sure. But, like, need to? No. It's still very, very bright. The only time I ever use gloss black is for the skeletons on my Imperial Knights. All right. Where did the PMP League move to? It moved to Facebook. If you just search for PMP, it's on there. Well, also, if you go back and look on my channel, I still do the end of month reviews, and the link to join is in there. All right. Red Wizard, I'm going to save that question. He asked about basically doing like drow skin. There'll be a whole video on that. It's a very complicated answer. People ask me it about once a show. I just need to do a tutorial on it. So I'm going to find somebody. And I'll give you a full tutorial for that one, Red Wizard, because I don't want to give you a cheap answer. Wally, who do you follow on YouTube? Whose videos do you enjoy the most? I follow, I actually mean miniature painters. Everybody who posts. Everybody. Like, I follow everything I can. Whose do I enjoy the most? Tough question. Like if you're doing miniature painting on YouTube, I probably follow you. But I don't know. Probably like I think Wapple I enjoy the most. I just like his style. He's very laid back. He's very fun when he paints. He has good conversation. And I just love to see how he plays with colors. Yeah. What's a good wash for a Loon Bosch on Mangler Squig? Using the basic color scheme in Duncan's tutorial. Whatever Duncan uses would be my answer. But theoretically, like, again, same thing I just said. Agrax or Druchii. Yeah, I've been down to San Diego a few times. I was actually there last fall, Liquid. But you should, you know, Aaron's over in San Diego. He's in your town. So I know he does some miniature monthly classes around there. So you can check that out. And there we go. Done. Boom. Got to the end, right at the 90-minute mark. We went a little long today, but that's okay. There's lots of really good questions. And I enjoyed answering them. So, folks, there we go. That brings us to the end of the Q&A. I hope that was all helpful. We do this once a month. I generally try to do it in the middle of the month. So it's always on a Saturday. It's always in the afternoon. But obviously, it's dependent on my schedule. It'll usually be in one of the two middle Saturdays, depending on my travel schedule, tournaments, painting comps, like work, whatever else is going on, life. But I will always do this in the middle of the month. I'll generally, I've been trying to actually set up the event the day before, and I always announce it on Twitter. So follow me at Warhammer Weekly, and you'll know when these are happening. I'm not trying to be that guy, but also if you click the little bell icon, it'll tell you when I post a new thing, and it would tell you when I scheduled this. I don't want to be like, smash that like button. I'm not that guy, okay? But like, if you're interested in making sure you catch these, the little bell is helpful. It will actually notify you. But at any rate, I hope this was useful, and I very much appreciate all the great questions. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and as always, I'll see you next time.